the Executive Committee of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of Nigeria, I have great pleasure in welcoming our eminent guests to this second edition of our Africa Policy Dialogue series with the theme, The Impact of Religion on Public Policy and Governance in Nigeria. I'd like to especially recognize His Highness Khalifa Muhammadu Sanusi II, the 14th Emir of Kano, and the Khalifa Tijaniya Nigeria, an eminent banker, scholar, and distinguished public servant of the Nigerian state. I would also like to especially welcome His Grace, the Most Reverend Matthew HASSAN KUKAH, Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, servant of God, scholar, fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Sciences, and an alumni of the Harvard Kennedy School like ourselves. Our moderator, associate fellow of the Africa Program and lead researcher on social norms and accountable governance project at Chatham House, Dr. Leena Hoffmann. To our distinguished audience who have joined us from different parts of the world and time zones, I say welcome and thank you for joining us. The Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of Nigeria is the representative organization of alumni of the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University in Nigeria. And our Africa Policy Dialogue series is one of the several initiatives through which we promote dialogue on important issues of public policy. The purpose of these dialogues include, but are not limited to giving our alumni association a platform to contribute to public debate on contemporary issues of public interest, while promoting the exchange of ideas which can encourage citizen participation in governance and bring about improvements in the formulation of public policy and implementation. At this time, when our country is challenged by insecurity, ethnic tensions, and separatist agitations, we are hopeful that the conversation on the impact of religion on public policy and governance, which will shortly commence, will yield new ideas on how government and citizens can better manage our religious and interethnic diversity for improved interethnic and religious harmony. I welcome you all once again, and I'm pleased to say that please sit back and enjoy what we believe will be a very, very interactive and very engaging conversation this afternoon.
Everyone, thank you, our President, Mr. Frank Mweke II. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good afternoon, distinguished guests. My name is Adora Ndukwe Ugu. Welcome again to the second edition of the Africa Policy Dialogue series, an initiative of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of Nigeria, where I currently serve as the Vice President of Finance. It is indeed an honor to introduce these two great speakers. They are two truly remarkable and influential Nigerians, both filled with sharp intellect and wit, both known to speak truth to power, both champions of good governance and defenders of democracy. Bishop Matthew HASSAN KUKAH is the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Sokoto and one of Nigeria's most respected clerics. He served as a member of the Nigeria's Truth Commission, Secretary of the Political Reform Conference for Nigeria, and is a member of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue at the Vatican City. He has also served under 3 popes. He was nominated by the Vatican to represent Africa on the advisory board of the King Abdulaziz International Interfaith and Intercultural Dialogue. As we know, he is a Harvard Kennedy School alumni, MPA class of 2004, and we're very proud of that. He holds a bachelor's degree in divinity from St. Augustine's Seminary, a PhD in religion and politics from the University of London, and he was a Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford in England. He has written several books and has featured in numerous academic articles and journals and research submissions. Our other distinguished guest is His Royal Highness Muhammadu Sanusi II, the 14th Emir of Kano and Khalifa of the Tijaniya Islamic movement in Nigeria. He was former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, where he instituted policies and measures that helped to safeguard the Nigerian banking sector in 2011. In that same year, the Bankers magazine named him the world's best central bank governor and was also named Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Sanusi, His Royal Highness Sanusi attended St. Anne's Catholic Primary School and King's College Lagos. He obtained a bachelor's and master's degree in economics from Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, and he is a frequent speaker at international forums on banking, politics, and religion, and is known for his knowledge of Islamic history, having earned a degree in Islamic Studies and Fiqh from the African International University in Khartoum. He is currently a research fellow at the African Study Center and an academic visitor at St. Anthony's College in Oxford University. His Royal Highness is also very well known for his advocacy for the girl child education and women's empowerment. And to bring this all together, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator and a distinguished scholar, Dr. Leena Hoffmann, an associate fellow of the Africa program at the prestigious Chatham House in London. She is the lead researcher for the program's Social Norms and Accountable Governance project. Dr. Hoffmann was also technical advisor to the Permanent Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel. She was also a Marie Curie Research Fellow at the Luxembourg Institute of Socio-Economic Research and an anti-corruption investigator at Nigeria's Independent Commission for Corrupt Practices. She studied sociology at the University of Jos and obtained a master's degree in international relations at the University of Lancaster, and her doctorate is in African Studies from the University of Birmingham. Dr. Hoffmann's research has focused on informal institutions and politics and governance, corruption and food security, including regional trade in West Africa. It is my pleasure again to welcome Your Highness, my Lord Bishop, and Dr. Hoffmann. And Dr. Hoffmann, I'd like to hand over to you now to begin the session. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Adora, and thank you so much, Frank, for that very warm welcome. Good day, esteemed audience and our stellar panel. So what I'm going to do first is some scene setting so that we can have a very defined context for our discussion today. So first of all, Nigeria's religious landscape, like across most of Africa, has changed dramatically over the past 100 years, with many significant changes taking place in recent decades. Nigeria lies almost at the epicenter of what a Pew report described as the continental meeting place in the middle of Africa's heavily Muslim north and predominantly Christian south. But of course, we know that that's never the whole story. Depending on who you ask, this continental belt that Nigeria sits like a buckle in is on the one hand persistently volatile and conflict prone, while on the other, an example or containing within it examples of interreligious coexistence. Nigeria is not only Africa's most populous country, it is one of the continent's most religious. So while the quantitative data hasn't been updated in over 10 years, the breakdown of a 2010 study for Nigerians identifying with one of its two major religions was about 49.3% of the population identified as Christians. Within that, you have 75% identifying as Protestant and 25% Catholic. So there we see the effects of waves of Pentecostal and charismatic movements in Nigeria and across Africa as well. 48.8% of Nigerians in 2010 identify as Muslim. Within that, we have 42% who were unidentified with any sect or group, while 38% were Sunni, 12 Shia, and 5% as other or unaffiliated. Also, around 2% of Nigerians identify with other religions, traditional, and so on, or even not at all. So that said, religious identities and the performative aspects of our belief systems are very public social markers in Nigerian life. You find them interwoven and animating everyday life, shaping how we think about our fortunes and personal outcomes. Material success, good health, prosperity, all of these really good qualities of a good life are very often thought of as a result of either religious devotion or the direction of an unseen hand of faith, directed by a supreme being. But it's not just in Nigeria that this is the case. In many parts of the world, religion provides millions of people with a sense of belonging, purpose, identity, solidarity, and a way to make sense of the world. For many societies, forms of social order are legitimized by religious systems, systems of norms, rituals, or if you prefer, practices, and behaviors are often central to group identity. In this way, religious beliefs and identities are a very important lens for us to be talking about governance and development in Nigeria. Speaking about development, religious institutions fill an ever-widening critical gap in social services in Nigeria. And this is the case in many places and increasingly more places where government institutions have collapsed or just outright failed. We're seeing rising poverty. Nigeria is currently in a hunger crisis. There's mass unemployment, more and more displacement, insecurity, and really poor human development indicators. Yet countless religious institutions and civic groups, or simply kin and friendship networks, are stepping in and providing a safety net for millions. So I look forward to our panel reflecting on the implications of religious organizations being a form of government in Nigeria, and what they think this means for a sense of national identity, common citizenship, and for a universal social contract between the Nigerian state and its citizens. The other side of the impact of religious values on governance that I'm looking forward to our panel speaking to is religion's association with unequal power distribution. And I'm fully aware that I'm speaking to a bishop and an emir. But this makes me even more curious to learn about what they think the hierarchies that religious institutions quite often foster, and what they think that means for accountability in a democratic system, what they think that means for the rights and interests of groups that suffer the most in hierarchical systems, specifically women and young people. It would really be remiss for us to speak about the impact of religion without addressing the fortune and futures of Nigeria's women and young people. Today happens to be International Youth Day, and 43% of Nigerians are below 14 years of age, while women make up roughly half the population. So it will really be important for us to reflect this afternoon, evening, morning, what the role of religious perspectives are in addressing inequalities in the distribution of power in Nigeria, as well as the distribution of wealth, opportunity, access, and personal freedoms. I also look forward to hearing from our panel their thoughts on how the language of religion and its theologies frame how we think in Nigeria about our politics and our problems. This is, of course, not a unique feature to Nigeria, but it is an important one for us to consider today, given the history of, in Nigeria, of religious movements being vehicles for political mobilization. Whether it is corruption, inequality, poverty, or poor governance, these issues are very quickly framed as moral problems, which require a correspondingly moral solution. So I would like to ask our panel, do they think these are moral problems? What does religious ideology, why does religious ideology provide many with the moral language and frameworks for making demands from government and critiquing the state? Does our panel think it is possible for this process of making accountability demands and demands for inclusion, is it possible for this process to be stable and inclusive? A related aspect that I anticipate our speakers will reflect on is the trajectory of religious movements and institutions shaping development and justice narratives in Nigeria. Given the deterioration of the conditions of religious freedoms, are there still windows of opportunity for religion, specifically Islam and Christianity, to influence public policy in an inclusive way? Is it possible in a world struggling to remake itself and its economies to be adaptive to irreversible climate change and to be more knowledge-based than natural resources-driven? Does Nigeria really want its government to interpret and respond to real-world problems based on religious perspectives? Or is this too binary a way of looking at it? And if it is too binary, what would a nuanced or straddling approach look like? So should religion be de-emphasized completely, and where should it be emphasized? How should Nigeria's governments at all levels legitimate and legitimize public policy in a multi-religious, multi-ethnic context? How should it engage with different constituencies, the moral conservatives, the progressives, pragmatists, and everyone in between? What are the incentives and what should be the sanctions for state governments when they do not protect religious freedoms in mixed states, or when members of one religious group are in the minority and those who exercise power are in the majority? How do we address the anxieties of minorities? And is inclusive policymaking still possible in states as far north as Zamfara, and in the middle as Kaduna and Plateau, and in the southeast as Enugu? So I know these are very uncomfortable themes, but I do hope that we have an honest and sincere conversation and that we're able to reflect on where consensus lies in Nigeria for constitutional rule of law and a common understanding of justice and human rights and what that should look like. And I think I share this belief with the Alumni Association that there aren't any two people who can handle a conversation this size. So to reflect on these questions and these prompts, I'd like to first invite His Highness Khalifa Muhammad Sanusi II, the 14th Emir of Kano, who will address us for 10 minutes. Following his address, we'll hear from His Grace, the Right Reverend Dr. Bishop Matthew KUKAH, who will also address us for 10 minutes. So Your Highness, you have our attention. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Leena. First of all, I was told this was 3 o'clock to 4:30, and listening to you sounds like we actually need 24 hours to go through those topics. I'm not sure we can go through all those questions. In addition to the fact that many of those questions are just being put on the table, given what we read in the concept note. It's a very complex subject, and let me thank the Kennedy School alumni for inviting me to participate, and let me welcome His Grace, my brother, Bishop HASSAN KUKAH, who I seem to meet now these days online more than any. My wife has been asking after you, so good to see you after so long. You know. What I will do is basically make a few opening remarks, and I'm hopeful that as we go along and we hear questions, we can zero in on specific elements that you have raised. The first thing to say is that a lot of the time when we talk about religion and politics and religion and public policy in Nigeria, anywhere in the world anyway, we need to recognize that we are all on a continent. So to give you a simple example, the United States of America is yet to sign the convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, CEDAW. And the official reason given by the US government, which will surprise many people, is that signing CEDAW will undermine what is seen as the traditional role of the woman as a caregiver and homekeeper. Now, that is not the kind of thing you would expect from the United States of America, but that is the reality today. US is not signing CEDAW because in America, there is still the patriarchal mindset that the woman belongs in the home, and CEDAW undermines that role. So we must expect that in other nations, which are further down the line as far as democracy and freedom and equality are concerned, you're going to have these issues to varying degrees. And the important thing is to unpack them and to understand them and to see where they're coming from. The second point I'd like to make is I am innately suspicious of all totalizing identities. The idea that because people come from a particular city or speak a particular language or profess a particular religion, you can put them in one box and say they think this way or they act this way or they say this. I'm a believer that we are all unique individuals. You just went through my CV. At the age of 8, I went to a Catholic boarding school. Okay, there was no attempt to convert me to Catholicism. I had many Christian friends. I interacted with Catholic nuns who showered me with love. I had an exposure to Catholics at a very young age. I don't think many people, I can't think of anybody at my age in Kano, from Kano, who was exposed to them, very few exposed to that environment at that age. From there, I went to King's College, where we were. This was shortly after the Civil War, 1973. Unit schools were being formed. There was a clear focus on forging a national identity, letting us know that one Nigerian was the same as the other, talking about citizenship and civics before I went to university. Now, I don't think, for example, that my mindset, my attitude, my approach to life is something that is shared by everybody from Kano or every Muslim or every Northerner. I think I have a unique approach to life that is formed by my own experience, by my own life. And I think this is also the same as with other individuals. Now, the reason I say this is that very, very often we make the mistake of talking about Muslims or Christians or Islam, thinking that we're talking about some idealized and real unifier, okay, and we can make assessments of views, and it's not true. Even within Islam, you've got a lot of multivocality. You've got Muslims have different understandings of what their religion is, and depending on context, you have different interpretations. And the same thing with the Christians. And when we come to political authority, if the president, for example, acts in a particular way, that is the president, that is the individual that he is. And he's not acting in the name of Islam or the name of the North or the name of religion, if he's a Northerner or if he's a Muslim. And even if, for example, you have a president who, say, uses the machinery of state to promote the interests of one segment of the political elite, religious or ethnic, that is that person doing it. It is not something informed by the religion. So I think this is the general context in which I would like to have this conversation so that we come back to the basic issues. Now, when you talk about religion and public policy, you then have to ask a number of questions. What is religion, and what do we mean by religion when we talk about religion and public policy? Are we talking about our individual faiths and practices? Are we talking about, say, the laws, like the Sharia law that you have, which is really public law? Are we talking about the relation between the religion and state? Are we talking about the ethical values and ethical dimensions of religion? Because those are, I think, the most important, which are often ignored. So people can say, I'm a Muslim or I'm a Christian. But if you, for example, are in government and you basically promote corruption or nepotism or injustice or inequity, even if you say you're a Muslim or Christian, are those particular attitudes a reflection of your faith, or are they just a reflection of your own incompetence and your own weaknesses as an individual, or your own moral failings as a person? And to what extent would it be fair to see you as a Muslim or a Christian rather than just see you as an incompetent person or a corrupt person or an unaware person or a cruel person? And these are questions I think that we've got to think about deeply. And the reason we must think about them deeply is that the way we interpret these situations has an impact on the narrative that we create. And that narrative ultimately has an impact on the way the Nigerian population, especially those who are followers, read it. So if I choose to say, because, say, a Christian president or a Muslim president behaves in a particular way, if I choose to define that in religious terms, what would happen is that all those who look up to me as a leader will probably see that in religious terms. And this is how these false identities are constructed and this tension comes in. What is important and what is fundamental? You look at the Nigerian people, these are 200 million people. We focus too much on a very tiny minority that over decades has monopolized political power, continues to recycle itself. And a lot of what happens in governance in Nigeria is a reflection of an internal struggle within a fraction of the elite that has nothing to do with the majority. I had reason to write about this in 1999 when President Obasanjo came to power. President Obasanjo appointed a cabinet, and there was a huge complaint that the cabinet was populated by Christians, similar to the complaints we have today about Buhari populating his government with Muslims. And the point I made is, in what way is the poor Muslim farmer in Zamfara better off because he has a Muslim minister? In what way is the poor Christian farmer in Kafanchan better off because there's a Christian minister? That is a fundamental question. For the poor people in this country, whether they're Muslim or Christian, what is it that unifies them? It is hunger, poverty, unemployment, insecurity, infant mortality. Those things do not know religion. How do we basically narrow the political? In a sense, this kind of conversation we're having actually gives religion and elevates it and gives it an importance it does not deserve, because it is part of the distraction that takes the mind away from the real problems today. Now, take our country. I looked at the World Bank World Economic Indicators, Economic Development Indicators of recent. You'll be shocked at what you'll see. If you take Nigeria's GDP per capita on a PPP basis, in 1980, it was $2,180. By 2014, it was $3,099. We'd increased it by 50%. Between 2014 and 2019, this number fell to 2,229. At this rate, by this year or next year, Nigeria's GDP per capita on a PPP basis will be back to where it was in 1980. We have not moved. We have not moved. We wiped out in 5 years all the progress made in the preceding 35 years. That is the kind of conversation we should be having, which we are not having. And what are the key drivers of this? You've got rising population growth, slow GDP growth, high rates of inflation, and devaluation of the currency. How do we interrogate this government? How do we interrogate administrations? How do we look at our social policies? How do we control demographic movements? And these issues underlie a lot of what you see. It is the rapid increase in population that has made farmlands become houses, grazing routes have become farms, and you have conflicts between herdsmen and farmers over resources. It's not ethnicity, it's not religion. From the days of King David and the Old Testament, you've always had conflict between herdsmen and farmers, and this is a conflict over resources, over water, over environmental change. The population of Nigeria has been increasing at over 3% per annum since independence, which means that every 20 years, we have been doubling in the same geographical area. You add to that desertification, you add to that environmental degradation, you add to that erosion and pollution in the south, in the north. You add to that the disappearance of the water resources in Chad Basin and in the Niger and Benue. You will automatically have conflict between people over resources. Now, whether they're Muslims or Christians or one ethnicity or another, the underlying fact is the fact that the resources. So this is, one of the first lessons you learn in economics is from Reverend Thomas Malthus. When the population increases with the limited supply of land, you get to a point where you have diminishing marginal productivity and you have pestilence and war. This is the reality of the whole of the world. Now, if you continue seeing this as Muslim versus Christian, Fulani versus Chief or whatever, we miss the point, which is that we need to look at what rate is our population growing. How do we make investments that will grow the economy and support this population? How do we provide the economic stability that will protect the purchasing power of people? And then on top of that, you can have the superstructure, the narrative of how you can have a good government, good governance, and a vision, which we seem to lack. Now, if you don't understand so when you deal with religion, as Amir, for example, and I see somebody say many of the social issues enters by religion, and that is true. Okay, I have had cause to interrogate the manner in which we have chosen to interpret Islam. And I'll just round up because I have 10 minutes to say that when you speak about Islamic law itself is multivocal. And it's extremely important for people to understand that when you talk about Islamic law, you're talking about interpretations by different scholars living in different areas at different times of what they see as a divine text. And very often in an environment, scholars can choose one interpretation and present it as the interpretation of Islam when in fact it is not. Okay, or when in fact it is just one out of a number of interpretations. And I'll give you a number of instances that which shock many people. And I hope that when we just talk about this later, we can go into that. So I'll give you an example. if you talk to the average person in Nigeria, you've got things like things that we do culturally. Should a man shake hands with women, for example? Many Muslims will tell you, no, it is haram. Okay, when in fact, when you study the text and the jurisprudence, you find that there's a complete difference of opinion among scholars, with many saying that if this is not an act that is aimed at some kind of sexual process, shaking hands, okay, is not prohibited. Now, some will say it is, others will not. Or you talk about entering the church, and they say Muslims can't enter the church. Now, scholars agree that you don't go into church in order to worship as a Christian. But scholars, many scholars say if you're going for a funeral or if you're going for some other event, it's in fact the Prophet allowed the Christians of Najran to stay in his mosque and on Sunday to conduct their Christian service in his church, in his mosque in Medina. Now, this is something that many people do not know. Or you have a question of, so two Christians are married and the woman decides to be a Muslim. And of course, all the four schools of law say that if she becomes a Muslim, she's got to leave her husband. But you go back to the what the books called the Musannafs, which talk about the views of the companions. I find that many of the early companions held the view that if she became a Muslim, she did not have to leave her husband. And that in fact, the Prophet did not annul the marriage of his daughter, who became a Muslim, when her husband only became a Muslim 6 years later. He did not contract a new marriage and so on. So you find that if you actually read the text, if you read the jurisprudence, you would find so many views. And then you can decide that in a multi-religious setting, such as the one we have, are there interpretations that are more suitable to religious harmony? Are there interpretations that are more suitable to peace and stability? Are there interpretations that are more consistent with our flourishing as a people, rather than hold on to interpretations that were historical? Final word.
Thank you.
Take the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. Muslim jurisprudence in that time was strongly identitarian. You read the scholars at that time, the Christian was an enemy. Okay, the Jew was an enemy. Now, but if you go to Christian literature at that time, you would find that that was exactly the view of the Catholic Church on Muslims. These were the days of the Crusades. The Catholic Church was trying to win Jerusalem for Christianity. A jurist living in the late Abbasid period, in the 13th, 14th century Syria, his view of Christianity was of the hordes, okay, and the armies attacking the Muslim world, trying to capture Jerusalem. Now, his view of Christians was a view of a warring community, just like a Christian knight or a Christian priest writing at that time would demonize Muslims, demonize Islam, because these were people at war. Now, when you come to the 20th century, we're in a different world altogether. If you're not under attack, if you're not being persecuted for your faith, if your Christian friends do not, if Islam does not deny you your right to practice, you cannot take a jurisprudence of war and make it the jurisprudence of peace. You can't make the jurisprudence of a totalitarian state and make it the jurisprudence of a secular state. Now, these are the kinds of questions that require, and it's about a lack of education, a lack of depth, a lack of commitment, a lack of breadth in the study of religion and the society in which we live. And that is what we need to go back to if we want to change this narrative. Sorry for going on for too long, but I hope that lays a foundation for broadly where my mind is on these matters.
Thank you very much, Your Highness, and thank you very much for putting all of these points around interpretations, all the ways we are lacking in shaping a narrative for a modern society or today's world. And you also ask us quite a number of questions as to where the consensus for a common understanding of citizenship and harmony lie. Just to move on to Your Grace, Bishop KUKAH, could I invite you, please, for 10 minutes to also reflect upon the role of religion in governance and public policy. We do have 65 minutes for this discussion, so I think we're good on time, but please if we can, keep ourselves around the 10, 12-minute mark to allow us for some cross discussion, and as well to get some Q&A in, that is questions from our audience. Already there are quite a number of questions coming in the Q&A box, so I will make a point to pose that to our panel. So Your Grace, you have our attention for 10 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm His Lordship, not His Grace. That title is slightly higher than where I stand.
Thank you.
Say that I welcome Khalifa, and to say, I don't know whether, I don't want to accuse him of anything, but as a day or two ago when we spoke, I was supposed to have spoken before him. So I really don't know what happened between then and now, because I knew that after, if he got a start before me, it would be very difficult for me to have anything to disagree with. Not because of his eloquence, but I mean, if you wanted a bit of spark, it's a mistake to ask Khalifa and I to speak on the same platform, in part because it's very difficult for me to find many points of disagreement in terms of the things he has had to say. However, on a lighter note, Khalifa, you had your event in Sokoto, and I take it personal that I wasn't invited, but I forgive you for that. But let me just give two quick anecdotes. One is real and is personal to me. In 1999, when Obasanjo became president, and he appointed, I have the greatest respect for, Alhaji Adamu Chiroma, of blessed memory. He appointed him, I think he was Minister of Finance. And I met him at the airport in Lagos. And he said to me, look, I've been looking for you because I have a quarrel with you. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sir. And I thought maybe it was because I hadn't congratulated him upon his appointment. And he said, no. He said, look, I was at a lecture you delivered, and you talked about Muslims being afraid to go to the mosque with their best pair of shoes because they were afraid their shoes might be stolen. And he said, I thought I will confront you about that, but actually last Friday I went to the mosque and my shoes were stolen. And I've been looking for you to find out whether you had anything to do with that. The second anecdote is a signboard a sign that was in a church saying, please be careful, keep your bag safe and keep your phones in safe places so that if any of them is stolen, remember, the thief might just say, thank God for answered prayers. I think in your early note, you made the point, about the appropriation of religion by all and sundry. But I think that, let me take up from where the Caliph has stopped. A lot of the things he said about the 15th century, 16th century, and let's just come back to the existential realities around which we are living in Nigeria, which is that tragically and sadly, who is president of Nigeria matters. It matters to Christians, it matters to Muslims, it matters to ethnicists, it matters to women, it matters to men. Unfortunately, this is the default part of our country, that somehow unresolved issues of ethnicity and religion have now come back to haunt us. And I perfectly agree with him when he talks about the fact that if we were in a normal situation, none of this should matter. And they shouldn't, but we are so far away from those ideals and those realities. Because of the nature of power, because of how power is being used by and has been used consistently by the political elite, because of the fact that power has been used to close opportunities of national integration, because of the fact that men, and well, especially more men, have given the impression, those in power have given the impression through the processes that got them to power that certain identities are important. And I think this point was made in the concept paper. The ideal, of course, will be for us to see how we can walk away from these realities. But truth be told, it is important that we are not where we ought to be as a nation. The level of consciousness, the level of awareness about the ingredients for building national cohesion, the reality is that those ingredients are really not there. And so it is largely default, but I speak as a Catholic, and I think that, the Caliph has made an eloquent point, and it is today that he is not accusing us in the Catholic Church of not making him a Catholic. But as I said to him, we remain very proud of having him as an an alumnus of our Catholic institution. And I think that had we had more like him, improving the quality of this conversation, because the way religion entered Nigeria, the way Christianity entered Nigeria is not the same with the way Islam entered Nigeria. And despite the fact that Islam was in Nigeria a clear 700-800 years or so before Christianity, in terms of impact, clearly people like him are a walking testimony of the kind of things and the images that the Christian community had. We may have our own differences, but I think generally, by and large, Christianity has focused on two critical institutions of human development. One is education, public education, and the second is health. Now, on these two counts, it is very clear, and I think that the contributions of Christianity to the development of Nigeria and to the emergence of the political and economic elite of Nigeria cannot be questioned. And that, for me, makes the point that Christianity did lay a solid foundation for the attainment of a plural, diverse society. And we made sure we experimented with this level of diversity in the way and manner that we ran our schools. Now, to come back to the point, where we are now, and as I said, it's a tragedy, because we can see very clearly that when a Christian is in power, there is a certain kind of a feeling that our own is in power. And when a Muslim is in power, that feeling resonates. How we got to this place, but I mean, it's something for us to talk about, but it is not a fact that we can deny. Now, going forward, if we look at chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, because you're trying to talk about the place of religion in public policy, and how all that affects governance. Chapter 2 of our Constitution laid down all the very basic framework and foundation, for organizing a society, because under fundamental objective and directive principles of state policy, literally everything that is required to make Nigeria what it ought to be, and to cut to trim the cutting edges or the sharp edges of ethnicity and religion and other forms of identity. Everything is very clearly provided there in our Constitution. Section 10 of the Constitution speaks very clearly. It is ambiguous, but that ambiguity is also its strength, when it makes the point very clearly that no state shall adopt religion as a state religion. We know that that is on paper. The reality is completely different, because the Constitution goes on from Section 14 all the way down to talk about why security and welfare of the citizens is the primary objective of government. And Section 14, subsection 3, talks about the fact that the composition of any government must reflect the federal character of Nigeria. And that there are no ethnic group, no religious group, let me even say gender, should predominate any part of governance, whether it is a ministry or whether it is government itself, and that this domination should not be from a few states or whatever. But we know that the reality is completely different. Subsection 4 talks about the fact that the composition of government at state and local government levels must also be carried out in such a manner that it recognizes the diversity of that state or that local government. And I think that one of the things we can do going forward is to come to terms with the fact that the inability of the governing elite, and perhaps even for us as intellectuals, to create a roadmap by which diversity can be properly managed, to create a roadmap and by which people can come to terms with the fact that diversity is an opportunity, is not a liability. And if we could lay out this foundation, and we have a political elite that is conscious of the fact that its responsibility is to build national cohesion. But I think we can make the point, and I hope that the Khalifa can come back to this point. I think that for us to continue with this conversation, or even talk about the role of religion in politics, we must return to what happened in 1903, when Lugar conquered the Sokoto Caliphate. Because the truth of the matter is that a lot of the things he was talking about around the Crusades and so on, a lot of that is still extant today in our conversations, and how people see Christians, how Christians see Muslims, and how we see one another. And this is largely because of the fact that, tragically, we never were able to address the issues of finding the ingredients for national integration. The result is that religion has become a weapon. And more so in northern Nigeria, it has become a weapon for mobilization. Tragically, again, as I said, the politicians have mobilized their people on the basis of religion, and they've never been able to deliver. We don't need to look any further. The tragedy in Zamfara, the tragedy in the whole of the core 11 or 12 northern states, the fact that the north itself has become a crime scene, and that by extension spilled over to the rest of Nigeria. So just very clearly that the political elite in northern Nigeria and their counterparts elsewhere need to appreciate the fact that the consistent manipulation of religion is largely to be the, to lead to the unraveling of the country as we have today. Consistently, from 1979, to the Sharia debate in 1988, the debate in 1995, until General Babangida himself declared the debate about Sharia in Nigeria's constitution as a no-go area. The northern political elite had always used the Sharia debate from 1979 as one way of stalling debates about the future of our constitution. And so to the extent that in 1999 through 2000 and 2001, we all had a situation in which all the states of northern Nigeria adopted Sharia law. Now, like I said,
Your Lordship, I have to say you have, sorry to interrupt your stream of consciousness, but I do have to say you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes is good enough. I'm just making the point, that it is now important for us, given the fact that the tragic situation we're in now, we can return to the scene of the crime. And the scene of that crime is that you are an elite that has actually in its own way no commitment to religion, but purely and simply commitment to power, using religion, raising the hopes of ordinary people, whether they are Christians or Muslims, to the possibility that they will be represented and compensated. The result is that you have ordinary people voting for these people, looking forward to living under an Islamic state or living under a state in which Christians are privileged. For me, these are the markers of danger. And I think that we as Christians and policymakers must begin to provide options, and hopefully that, and this is why I think this is a very commendable initiative, that we should begin to provide templates for helping politicians come to terms with the fact that primarily our religious identity must be subordinated to our citizenship, our common sense of citizenship. In which case, opportunities can be available to citizens because they are citizens of Nigeria, not because of their loyalties to religion or ethnicity. That was the objective of the Constitution. Is still very much lived by abuse and default. But if we can go back to the principles enunciated very clearly in our Constitution, I think that we'll be able to have a great country ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Your Lordship, and thank you so much for the correction. Clearly, I'm not a very good Catholic or one at all. I think there's so many themes that have emerged from the presentations from both yourself and from His Highness. I do want to cast, because there are lots around the ingredients for creating this Nigeria that we are speaking about, but I do want to highlight again the fact that we're having this conversation on International Youth Day. And I want to just ask you both to reflect and bring you've talked about the crisis of education. You highlighted the schooling experience of His Highness in a Catholic school. And while you were talking about that, I was wondering, is it that there needs to be more of public policy around interfaith schooling and socialization, and what would that look like? And how do we reform education for more tolerance and harmonious living? But I do want to ask this question in the context of today being International Youth Day. And I want both of you to reflect a bit more on how we can address disaffection and discontentment amongst Nigeria's young population. When I was making my presentation, I highlighted the fact that 43% of Nigeria's population are 14 years of age. We are having this conversation also in the shadow of the NSAS protests and the government's response to that. In many ways, we can think about the agitation for the end of police brutality in the context of young people wanting to engage in a political system and also create an identity that is not shaped by, that's not sharpened and shaped by religious identity, but a national one. So I would like to invite you both to comment on what model of governance would guarantee or at least create this path or offer these ingredients for creating a national identity, a common sense of citizenship and inclusion that, that highlights and includes the voices of Nigeria's young people. How should Nigeria's young people engage with its political process?
Leena, before I answer your question, if you don't mind, I think in order to have the flow, if I may, I would like to make a few comments on Bishop KUKAH's remarks and then build. Is that okay?
You can make comments on Bishop KUKAH's remarks, and I perhaps will have to give him 2 minutes to do so as well for yours.
Bishop is my friend. Well, on a lighter note, I went to a Catholic school, but the food was horrible. And, you know, my friends in Capital School had better food and had warm water, and we had to have a cold bath in the morning. But so Bishop KUKAH, you guys really suffered us a lot, but thanks anyway. You know, Bishop KUKAH made many remarks that I agree with totally. As is usual, there will be one or two issues that one would have some observations on. The first is a sweeping comment about Islam and education, or Christianity and education. And I think we need to make a distinction between Islam in northern Nigeria before colonialism and Islam after, and the Muslim people after colonialism, and also understand what you mean by education. The reality is that Islam came to Nigeria through the Almohads and the Almoravids, and these were traders and scholars. And it was, in fact, a religion that brought education. It brought the Arabic language, it brought jurisprudence, it brought commerce, it brought the sciences. You must remember that in the 13th century, that was the time of the glory of the Abbasid Empire. That was the time when the Christian world was in the Dark Ages. That was when you had the whole renaissance of Islamic philosophy in the days of Al-Ma'mun and so on. We had the Dar al-Hikmah in Baghdad. So this was actually, Islam came to Nigeria at a time when there was a flourishing of knowledge, okay, astrology, sciences, the religious sciences, and so on. And it continued until colonialism. That's important. Now, with colonialism, and I would like Bishop KUKAH, and I'm sure he's read this, or maybe if he hasn't, to go back to Peter Tibenderana's book, Religion and Cultural Change in Northern Nigeria from 1850 to 1950. Now, that book makes a point very clear. The first three governors of the northern region, Lugard and Shirwa and Haskell, came here from the Sudan. British colonial policy, as far as education of northern Nigeria, and this is documented, the British colonial policy was aimed principally at ensuring that the British did not produce a Muslim elite in the northern Nigeria that would be progressive of the kind they produced in Egypt and India, which gave them problems. Educational policy in northern Nigeria was supposed to be technical. It was supposed to teach people belief in hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy would be the emir. At the top of the emir would be the white man. The supremacy of the white man was to be taught. This was the policy of the British in northern Nigeria. Education was aimed at insulating northern Nigeria from the processes of modernity. So this is not an Islamic issue. This was an issue of colonial education policy. And I think it's important to remember that. And be that as it may, it did hurt northern Nigeria. It did set northern Nigeria behind. There are many reasons. One of the reasons, of course, is language. If you come to a population that had for centuries learned the Arabic language. They knew the Arabic script. They could write Hausa or Fulfulde in using the Arabic script. And you suddenly say that all education that is not in the English language is not education. You have rendered that population totally illiterate. So the Christians who learned English at the hands of the Christian missionaries were educated, but the Muslims who learned sciences or history or whatever in Arabic, but could not speak English, were uneducated. So it's extremely important when we speak about education and religion to bear this. This matter is a bit more complex, I think, than the bishop makes it. However, having said that, the result of that educational policy was that it led to an entrenchment of certain cultural values and cultural practices of the past and made the northern Nigeria less amenable to an openness and to a more liberal and progressive attitude. So this is why if you look at the Muslim world as a whole, you find that northern Nigeria is one of the most conservative parts. Many of the things that northern Nigeria will tell you he will not do, you go to the Arab world, that's not how it is. I mean, take Saudi Arabia out, but go to Tunisia, go to Algeria, go to Morocco, go to Malaysia. They're all Muslims. And I mean, you have simple issues. If you talk about, you shouldn't marry off a girl at the age of 12 or 13, somebody will tell you, well, there's nothing in Islamic law that says you cannot marry at a very young age. But why is it that other Muslim countries have adopted the age of 18 or 19 as minimum age? If you say that you should not marry a second or third wife if you cannot maintain them and provide for them, somebody will say in northern Nigeria, you are undermining Islam. Well, why is it that in Saudi Arabia and in Malaysia and in Tunisia and Algeria, you've got rules around polygamy that ensure that you do not take on a second wife unless you have evidence that you can maintain them? So this is not Islam. This is about cultural practices, okay, and a cultural mindset that has been entrenched and crystallized by virtue of the educational policies that we inherited and the disconnect between a people's needs and aspirations and the needs and aspirations of a colonial administration whose objective was to suppress northern Nigeria and make sure that northern Nigerians do not rise for independence. Unfortunately, the northern Nigerian political elite, which succeeded the British colonial administration, saw the benefit of keeping those people in that state of a lack of education, because what happened was that the British left and the northern Nigerian just took their place and they continued to dominate and exploit those people. And this is the challenge that you have in northern Nigeria. Now, when you talk about the Sharia, Bishop, you know that when the Sharia things, I spent years debating, arguing, contesting the Sharia. Not because I felt that Muslims do not have a right to implement Sharia, but because the implementation of Sharia was a politically motivated exercise. It had nothing to do with and even the rulings were not concerned with Islamic law. So I'll give you two examples. So you had an example of a man whose hand was cut off was amputated for stealing a cow. And they would tell you that yes, in Islamic law, the punishment for stealing is amputation of the hand. Well, why haven't you continued amputating hands? 20 years, stealing has not stopped. If Sharia was Sharia, we would have amputated 100,000 hands by now. And when you go back to the history of Islam, people do not recall that the second Caliph of Islam, Umar bin Khattab, actually suspended amputation in a year of famine because he said there is so much poverty and hunger, I cannot say who stole because he was hungry and poor and who stole because of wickedness. How can somebody come to a poor state like northern Nigeria, with one of the lowest per capita incomes in the world, with the high levels of poverty, and the first thing you do as a leader is not to provide for the welfare of those people, but to cut off the hands of a man who steals a cow and call that Islam? And these were debates that we had. These were arguments that we had for years. And the same thing with women. And the issue of Sharia being appropriated as a tool of politics is universal among the Muslim world. And usually, you'd find that when politicians appropriate Islam for politics, the greatest victims are the Muslims themselves. It is the poor Muslim who gets his hand amputated because people say he has stolen, even though he may have stolen out of poverty. It is the Muslim woman whose freedoms are constrained because people have defined themselves as Muslim by virtue of how they treat their women, how she dresses, how she talks to men, whether she's an adulteress. Those become the central issues of discourse. And then resources are transferred. And I'm not coming to your point, Leena, because I'm gradually coming to the economic consequences of the politicization of religion. If you take Northern Nigeria in the last 20 years, it would be nice to go and look at how much resources were poured into the religious sector, how much resources were poured into preaching, into Hajj, pilgrimage, into Hisbah. If you check, I said Islamic law, we are all Malikis. Imam Malik said that a poor man who has never been to Hajj, it is illegal to use state resources to pay for him to go for Hajj because it is not compulsory if he doesn't have the resources. Yet we will take hundreds and thousands of people who have money, who have been to Hajj several times, use state resources, buy them tickets, give them allowances, and say we are being Islamic, when in fact what we are doing is a complete opposite of the rulings of Islamic law. Now, all that money could have gone into education. It could have gone into public health. It could have gone into security. How much money was taken out of development and put in the religious sector? And if you do that, is it any surprise that 20 years after, Northern Nigeria has fallen further behind Southern Nigeria in education? This is a religion where the first thing revealed was Iqra, read. How come we are the backward ones as far as education is concerned? Now, these are the questions that I think we need to ask. So you now come to the youth. I'm sorry, Leena, but economics is not about, economics is a discipline. It's a field. If you pursue wrong economic policies, you get the wrong economic outcomes. For decades in this country, we have wasted our resources. Okay, look at the fuel subsidy regime. I've been talking about this since 2011. We take trillions and trillions and trillions of naira. We tell people we're giving them cheap fuel. At the end of the day, we have bankrupted ourselves. You've set up an economic system where today, 90% of government revenue goes to debt service, and we're still borrowing. We're spending trillions on fuel subsidy. And then we get the central bank to print the trillions because we cannot pay salaries if we do not print the money. And as the money is printed, we create inflation. And then we create devaluation. And then we find that we have to pay more on subsidy because today, if you remove the fuel subsidy, you've got to pay about 400 naira per liter of petroleum products. We are an oil-producing country. If we had removed this subsidy when we said we should remove it, even if it was in 2015, we will not be here. So this is not about Buhari being a Muslim or Shimbajo being a Christian. This is about what are the economic policies that are being pursued. Are they policies that will create jobs? Are they policies that will create economic growth? Are they policies that will moderate population growth? Are they policies that will lead to prosperity? And if we reduce this to religion, we miss the point. Bad economics is bad economics. Now, I've always spoken against it. I mean, I know, I said it when I was the governor of Central Bank, I raised these issues. When this government came in, I raised these issues. The reason I'm where I am today probably is because I raised these issues. But what surprises me is where are the economists in Nigeria, Muslims and Christians? When I was talking about subsidy, when I was talking about money supply, when I was talking about...
Your Highness,
yes.
You're talking about conversations around accountability, and I do want to include your Lordship, Bishop KUKAH, because there's a lot of points that you've raised there. I wonder if Bishop KUKAH would like to respond, because there is a lot. Both of you agree a lot. There are disagreements as to some methods and models, but on the whole, there is a lot of agreement as to the sharpening of religion for political gains. But you speak a lot about accountability and systems of accountability and how bad economic policy results in bad economic outcomes. So how do we create systems of accountability on scale? Because that's basically at the heart of maybe a lot of what you have said. Where should accountability thrust from? And where should it be heading to? So I think you're muted, but I'd like Bishop KUKAH to respond to that about accountability, and then we take some audience questions. So we include our audience as well.
No, I won't talk about accountability because that's not, that was not your first question.
You want to talk about, if you want to talk about youth, and then respond on the points that
respond to the
His Highness made on accountability.
About education. You know, I mean, when he says that education was actually meant to, what's the word, to put the North down. I don't know, but there was the first school that was built in northern Nigeria was built in Katsina. The second school that was built in northern Nigeria was built in Zaria. And those two schools have provided the North with the elite. Today, the Barewa All Boys Association is one of the strongest associations, but also it's part of it's literally the gateway to those who want power in Nigeria. But let me come to the point. In the biography of Sardauna said very clearly that with hindsight, he was shocked, looking back at how very little, or if anything at all, was done about education in northern, in the middle belt of Nigeria. So the first, I think that if you, I mean, the biography of one of the last governors, in Kaduna, in the north, made the point again very clearly that education in northern Nigeria was calculated to raise up a northern Muslim elite. And to that extent, that was pretty successful. Education did not come to the middle belt of Nigeria through government. The education that came to the middle belt and most parts of northern Nigeria was largely education by missionaries. So I think that point is not a point I will agree with. But let's even come back to the issue. And it is the issue of the attitude of the northern Muslim elite to education and other areas of life and their willingness or lack of to take full responsibility. First of all, as we are speaking, there are 170 universities in Nigeria. Out of that number, federal government has 43 universities. There are 79 private universities in Nigeria. How many private universities are in northern Nigeria? You can hardly count one or two. Now, and the elites in Nigeria are stealing from the same process. And whereas there are moral implications to stealing, the state in Nigeria is the domain of privilege and the domain of theft. And I think most ordinary Nigerians understand that, governance to a greater extent has always been a criminal enterprise. So the point to make is that it is clear to us that elites from the south and other parts of Nigeria are making more rational choices to support the welfare and well-being of their people. The northern elite seems to simply believe that everything has to be done by the federal government. And I think if you go, even I'm here in the University of Lagos, you go around the University of Lagos and you see the edifices that have been put up by ordinary people, businessmen, who are local to this environment. You go to Ahmadu Bello University, you go to many of the key universities in northern Nigeria, Usman Danfodio. You go to Usman Danfodio University, how many Alhaji so and so are you going to see that this is the project they've committed, to any of these universities? You can find Tony Elumelu's signature in Usman Danfodio University. You can find T.Y. Danjuma's, signature in Ahmadu Bello University, in Bayero University, despite the fact that all of this being put together, these universities are still denying Christians an opportunity to do something as basic as worship, despite the usage of Usman Danfodio University is over 43, 45 years old. The same with Bayero University. But as I'm talking to you up till today, the foundation staff of those universities were Christian professors, because how many northerners, had enough education to be able to be foundation staff of these universities? But today, up till today, as we are talking, despite a letter from the Federal Ministry of Education, we are still not able to, we are not allowed to build churches in these universities up till today. Despite the fact that in many of these universities, there are 10, 15 or more mosques scattered all over the place. So, and these are the areas of the life where young people are making life decisions about their future, about getting married, about creating friendships, about choosing career. And yet, it is here that we are showing the most divisive policies as far as religion is concerned. And a lot of these young people are taking these prejudices along with themselves into Abuja. And this is why you find that, unfortunately for us, with all the opportunities available to us, there is no sense of urgency. And northern Nigeria is complete. The political elite in northern Nigeria is complete. Because if you are refusing education and you are producing such a huge population that are ill-equipped, the rest of Nigeria is suffering the consequences of the political elite refusing to take its responsibility. Building schools for, building schools for communities, other social services that the rest of southern Nigeria has come to take for granted. These are the issues. So I think that it is convenient, and I speak to many people in northern Nigeria, and I hear people speaking arrogantly, hey, we don't mind. We don't have the education, but we have the population. After all, you don't need a certificate to vote. So, okay, you said, I mean, the governor said that he gave...
Your Lordship, could I just step in there?
Let me take a minute.
Because I know it will be impossible. There's a whole breadth.
I will take a minute to finish what I'm saying. Okay. I'm just making the point that the political elite have invested in refusing to educate, their citizens. The rest of Nigeria is bearing the brunt. That is why today, should we not be ashamed of ourselves? The Khalifa himself made the point that in a state like Zamfara, where only about 25 children are able to sit for and pass examination, when Anambra is sending how many thousand children to school, and we are sharing the same space. Well, the point is that this country, we will not move in any direction unless the North decides to sit up, because we are producing these huge populations, and the politicians say we need this population to be able to stay in power. Well, we will not, where we are today is based on, this is the zenith of the manipulation of religion in Nigeria. That we in northern Nigeria, I'm a proud northerner, but I am horrified and saddened that all we are now famous for is exporting violence across our own doorsteps, and largely the problem that that the country is facing. Without an educated youth in northern Nigeria, too many young people are crying for education and opportunities, but the political elite are standing in the gateway, and the result is why this country is going under. So for me, these are the issues. If we talk about tomorrow, the best gift we can give to anybody, all children can now see, is education. And if you are not educating your people, I don't see the hope for us as a country because of the bulging population in northern Nigeria. And that is why the issue in the north is a crisis situation that we must try and resolve.
Leena, we can't get away. Leena, I'm just coming to Your Highness. I will come to you. Okay. We can't seem to get away from talking about just the education crisis and population growth. Frank, you guys put this panel together, so I will have to allow them to speak their minds and speak across to each other and engage in conversation and debate. So what I'm going to do is ask Your Highness to respond to the laundry list of challenges, as it were, that Your Lordship has put forward concerning,
Leena, I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's a great conversation so far. I know His Highness will probably want to make a few more points, but there are questions from the audience. I think it would be fair to take some of those questions, pose to our guests, so that they can also respond to this and feel a sense of inclusion. Thank you very much.
My comment is 1 minute, actually, Leena. And it is to say that I agree 100% with Matthew KUKAH. I don't think there's any disagreement on this. I mean, what I don't said.
See any point.
No. What I said was, if you go back to the research done by Tibenderana, this was British colonial policy. So yes, they produced a northern Muslim elite, but what type of elite? They produced the elite that did exactly what they are doing. Because the whole purpose of educational policy was to ensure that with indirect rule, with a small number of British people, you could dominate and control northern Nigeria without investing the resources. And the northern Nigerian elite basically just inherited it and continued in the last 60 years. And that's the point I'm making. Everything here.
There is a huge question around how do we then begin to colonial legacy.
Yes, so first of all, I want it to be clear that I have no disagreement with Matthew over the fact that the northern Nigerian Muslim elite has been responsible for the backwardness of the north. And with that, they have brought down Nigeria. I also do not have any issues, with the fact that until you face education, until you invest in education, especially with the girl child education, you're not going to move forward. That is extremely important. I just said, I was just talking about the historical roots. Those are because the elite themselves were the products of a system. And that system was designed to produce that kind of elite. Unfortunately, which is not the elite.
Just a moment, Bishop.
The rest of us, Khalifa, have suffered double jeopardy. We suffer from colonial rule, and we're suffering from those. from indirect rule.
Exactly. So Father KUKAH,
especially the Christian minorities in northern Nigeria.
Father KUKAH, just a moment. Just conclude your point, Your Highness.
I hear your point, and I'm very careful because I'm very careful not to make this a Muslim versus Christian debate. And
we would like to avoid making that.
And I'm not here on a platform of defending Islam or attacking Christianity or defending what Muslims have done that is right or wrong. The reality is, okay, so if you take, we all have to look at the leadership that we have had. And we all have to look at the people who have governed us. So I'll give an example. I was Emir of Kano I was appointed in 2014. Okay, now you've got in Kano, for example, a large population of Igbos and Yoruba and non-Muslims. And I'll give you one example. Okay, once we had this End Power thing done by the federal government, and I got a frantic call from Mariam Uwais, who was the presidential special advisor, because the legislature representing Kano had written to say that 90% of the people who were given End Power in his constituency were not indigenous of Kano. Okay, and she called me. And I asked her, okay, who are these people? And she gave me names, and the names were Igbo and Yoruba and others. So which local government? She said, Fagge local government. I said, but that is where you've got all the Igbos and Yorubas in Kano sitting. If it was Kano Municipal or Bichi or somewhere, I'd have an issue. And I said, look at the man's voters register. People who voted for him were Igbo and Yoruba, because that's where they are in Sabongari and Fagge. She didn't know what to do. I said, tell the vice president to tell the member of the House of Reps that I said that these people are indigenous of Kano. They can be Igbo, they can be Yoruba, they can be Christian. If they're in Kano, they are indigenous of Kano. That the Emir said they are indigenous of Kano. If he has an issue, let him come to me. Now, at the end of the day, these decisions, what we have is a question of what our leaders do. If I had chosen to say I'm going to defend Hausa people or Muslims as indigenous of Kano, that would have simply reinforced a narrative that these people are non-indigenous. I mean, these are people whose fathers, grandfathers were born in Kano. They came how many hundreds of years ago? So if you have a leader, whether it's a Muslim or a Christian, in the Christian parts of the North today, you've got leaders who are encouraging the persecution and the killing of Muslims as non-indigenous. And the same thing with the Muslims. You go to Jos today, the Fulanis are said to be non-indigenous. You go to Zaria, some Christians are seen as non-indigenous. These are people who've been there for hundreds of years. So the question is not about religion, it's about the kind of leadership that we have, the kind of understanding of citizenship. Okay, one of the things I did as Emir was I actually said the Eze Igbo, the head of the head of the Edo, the chief of Edos, the heads of Yorubas, I put them on a salary from the Emirate Council, just as I put district heads. When I was going to Benin, I went with the leader of Edos, and I said he is here as part of my delegation, not as an indigenous of Edo. So the point is, if we decide to understand, if we take everybody, if we understand the concept of citizenship, and our citizenship is not ethnic, it is not religious. Every citizen
national.
Yes, and
it should be national. And I do want to come in there because I want us to shift the conversation towards talking about solutions. And that is why I started to include the point about accountability, because we are talking a lot about a lot that is wrong, a lot that is faulty in the political class and political elite in Nigeria around political leadership and the understanding of a common citizenship. So I do want to pose this question, and this is from the Q&A box and from our audience. And we have a few hundred comments on here, but I just want to pick one and just all the comments talk about how eloquent and in-depth the conversation has been. So I do want to pose this question to Your Highness and Your Lordship. It says very eloquent, and this is from Tarila McClint, very eloquent points. However, could the panel, says, however, the Emir should tell us if essentialist interpretations of religion, and I will pose this to both of you, either of Islam or Christianity, are relevant to contemporary civil society. So I want to shift our conversation to accountability and the role of civil society, and what should be done to enable us overcome these interpretations, these sharp interpretations of Islam and Christianity that seem to have brought us to this place where we are? How do we overcome these interpretations, and how do we create narratives for a contemporary civil society that can demand accountability and a change in political leadership in Nigeria? Thank you.
Do I go first?
Could you please go first for 2 minutes? We have been allowed more time to for about 20 more minutes. So could you please go first, and then Your Lordship?
Excellent. I mean, look, Leena, it's essential interpretations anywhere are divisive and backward, and they're political, and they're false. And this is not just about religion. In America, you've got white supremacists, and you have an essentialized concept of Black people. Whether you've got essentialized views of how the woman is supposed to be, because essentialized views of supremacy. So for me, whether it's religion or ethnicity, and this is why I started by saying that personally, I'm always skeptical about all sorts of totalizing ideologies. The idea that people, okay, you can arrive at one view and say Muslims are like this or Christians are like this. You know, it is the foundation of all the evils that we have. I have many Christian friends. I mean, I have Christian brothers. As far as I'm concerned, okay, I look at everybody as an individual. You're a good person or a bad person, male or female, Muslim or Christian. I don't believe that the one Christian is the same as the next Christian. Human beings are different. And I think we first of all, democracy and freedom and progress is first of all about undermining totalitarian visions, because those totalitarian visions only serve those who claim to be authority or to be the authorities. If you say this is an essentialized view of Christianity or Christian or Islam, people like me who are traditional rulers ultimately establish a hierarchy, which is what you talked about, a hierarchy, because we are now the authority who define for people what it is like to be a good Muslim. And then we can decide who is a good Muslim and a bad Muslim. And then we decide that we are speaking for all Muslims. And then we use that as the basis for negotiation in the political space that is Nigeria. The same thing with Christians. So I think we need to stop this. We need to understand that whatever position you are, you do not have a direct access to God. You can have an interpretation. You can have an opinion. But this idea that there's an essentialized view of Muslim, especially if it is set in contradistinction to non-Muslim or Christians, to non-Christians, this is the beginning of the problem. Finally, I have seen many of these comments saying I am blaming colonialism. I am not. This is an educated audience. I have blamed the northern elite for their problems. I have said that elite was a product of colonialism, and they have continued to treat the North with the same mindset as the colonial masters. All these people commenting, please try and listen to me and be fair. I have not said that the white people are responsible for our problems. Okay, it was the foundation, but then we also continue. We have had 60 years to correct it. I don't think any Nigerian can blame the British for the problems of Nigeria between 1960 and now. We have had 60 years. So if we continued with those policies, we are responsible for those policies. It was just about trying to make a distinction between Northern Nigeria pre-colonialism and post-colonialism.
And it was trying to set it in its historical context. So you did emphasize that. That is pretty clear, and I'm pretty sure our audience understands that as well. Your Lordship, could you please respond to this question around the role for contemporary civil society, and where should accountability and how should accountability look like in the Nigerian context?
Thank you very much. Look, let me recommend two books. One is maybe 3 years ago. The title is The Jungle Grows Back by Robert Kagan. And the second is Isabel Wilkerson's Caste. Because it helps us to, especially, the book Caste, it helps us understand power and how, it's appropriated, whether we use gender, whether we use race, or whether we use religion. But let me, to speak to the issue, again, I come back, you cannot build a civil society without an educated elite. And this is where the governments of northern Nigeria have done tremendous injustice, both to themselves and to the Christian community. As we are speaking, in Kaduna State, for example, all our schools that were taken over, schools built by the churches, all of them, that have, a lot of them lit from northern Nigeria have come from there. These schools were taken over. The names have been changed to Muslim names or to they're called government schools. And these schools were still producing the best citizens. Those schools are now in shambles. But northern Nigeria has almost by philosophy said, well, we'll rather have these schools as long as they are not Christian. Okay, we'll rather have the schools even in shambles. And even if they are not able to produce the kind of people that can compete. Like I'm saying, if you take Anambra State as an example, where the governor returns schools and then realized that the amount of money he was saving was more than 50-60% of what he has been saving in the same schools. So I'm making the point that it is important that northern Nigeria partners with the with the Christian community for us to progressively move the needle in favor of education. Because it is, look, the jungle is growing back. That is why the greatest threat to Nigeria now are the kind of people, the kind of bandits and the kind of characters that are now holding the country to ransom. They are holding Islam to ransom. They are holding the North to ransom. So this is, when I speak, people tend to, okay, you don't want to hear what Bishop KUKAH is saying. Oh, I'm divisive. Listen, without idea, we don't have to be friends, or we don't have to love one another because we love what the things we are saying. And to be, we don't have to be disagreeable. We must disagree with one another because we see things differently. But ultimately, the test of what we're saying is how much does it increase the capacity of our society, to succeed itself? Because here we are. Without it, should we, for example, I was a priest in one of the poorest parts of Kaduna, in Kakuri, and I kept telling my congregation, there is no water in Kakuri, there's no light in Kakuri. And it's not because you are Christian or Muslim, because there is no place where Muslims are drinking water and Christians are not able to drink water. We're dealing with the issues of an impoverished community. How do we rebuild our communities? I think the Khalifa made the point at the beginning. Religion has become an obstacle even to our own progress, development, and integration. And this is not religion, it is religion without faith. At that level, we're focusing on rituals and rubrics and so on and so forth. But every religion has the capacity it has a liberating force. It has a cleansing force because by itself, it's quite an irony, that those who enslaved us came from a Christian tradition. But even at that in America, it was from the same Bible that Black people were able to craft a narrative of liberation. So a religion that does not improve the quality of life for citizens across the board is not a religion, it's idol worship. And I think, therefore, from where I stand, I published a book in 1998 on democracy and civil society. And my argument centrally has been that the principles of the church must be at the center of civil society. In 2011, for example, it's very interesting. President Buhari, General Buhari, as he then was, when he couldn't win the election, one of the things he took to the Supreme Court in fighting his case was the report of the Catholic Bishops' Conference report on the monitoring of the elections in 2011. So we've been at the forefront of all this. In many areas of interreligious dialogue, we've tried to find a common narrative. But, so whether it's the Sultan, whether it's Cardinal, whether it's Nairek, there are these platforms. But a government and a political elite that is committed to doing the wrong things, there is very little that that can be done. We find ourselves blaming religion. I don't think that there are religious problems in Nigeria. I think there are problems of the corruption of government, and there is a problem with the quality of men and women who are appropriating religion and see nothing in politics except power. And that is why, ironically, if you are a northerner and you are a Muslim, you should feel ashamed, because why would our people be monopolizing power for such a long time? And I agree with the Khalifa. They may not have been holding power for Muslims, but the truth of the matter is that perception is everything. And if it were that all the things that have happened in the last 6 years, that the North was the safest part of Nigeria, that the North, I can see Northerners producing, going back to their farms and so on and so forth, we will not be having this conversation. It will be understandable, even if not acceptable. But here we are, that we are being charged and found guilty of monopolizing power, but unable to redeem ourselves. So I think that the greatest thing that we can do to ourselves, those of us in power, is to reduce the temperature and help our ordinary people to be able to confront government directly for its inability to do right, both for collectively for its citizens, not because people are Christians or Muslims.
Thank you very much. I do want to follow up on with a question from the audience. This is from Juliet Kegum, and she says, is it possible for the Nigerian state to become a secular state in word, policies, and deed? Or are there ways to integrate religion in a pragmatic way in policy making in ways that enhance inclusion, progress, accountability? How do we create a new constitution that captures the reality we desire? I would ask, Your Highness, could you please begin with that question?
I mean, Leena, first of all, I mean, as you know, secularism itself is it's a word that
should I perhaps phrase that and say political secularism?
Okay, yes, because I mean,
I would call it a political secularism.
If you look at France, if you look at Turkey, if you look at the United States, if you look at the UK, you've got different forms of secularism.
Yeah, given the context of the conversation so far, I think we should.
I think our constitution, okay, needs to be looked at, but it's not really so much about secularism, because as far as religion is concerned, the constitution is very clear that the Nigerian state cannot adopt any religion as a state religion. Okay, and the safeguards are there by guaranteeing citizenship and defining citizenship in terms of being Nigerian, that you cannot be discriminated against by virtue of your faith. And I think this is very clear. Now, where the problem is, it is not about a document, it's about us as a people. It's about the institutions that we have in place. Do they work? Okay, if you have a Federal Character Commission, for example, and in fact, how we have defined diversity. So if you look at the present government, I've heard Father KUKAH speak several times about how this government is dominated by Muslims. And okay, but how about this government is dominated by men? How many women are there? Have we asked that question? Is diversity only religious? What is our general attitude towards diversity? You've talked about the youth. How many young people are in senior positions in the government? So first of all, even as a people, as a country, we need to understand, okay, that diversity goes beyond religion. It goes beyond things. And very often, I'll be honest, very often, the reason people talk about Islam and Christianity is because that is where you have probably the highest potential of having the largest number of people who can support you about going to political power. How can you have a country where half of the population is women and you have how many senators? 3, 5, I don't know, out of 109. In the entire northern region, you've got 19 states. How many houses of assembly have female legislators? And usually to be 1, maximum 2 out of the 19 states. So I think we need to have a general conversation around diversity, and we have to protect that diversity. And we have to pursue it not because our interests are going to be affected, but it's simply political sense and sagacity. Look, if I'm the president of Nigeria today and I decide to fill the ministers and positions with Muslims, I'll be there for 8 years. Am I not worried that when I leave and you have a southern Nigerian Christian president, she will now fill all those positions with Christians from the south? And I'm therefore setting the foundation for disenfranchising the very section of the elite that I was trying to protect. So even as a matter of political interest, in a multi-religious, diverse society, diversity is a value that needs to be adopted and handled and taken by all of us. Secondly, I don't even agree that you have, the president is a Muslim, the vice president is a Christian. When we had Christian presidents, vice presidents were Muslims. You have ministers from 36 states of the Federation. You've got Christians and Muslims in the government. So the actions of these governments, okay, are not necessarily taken by one group or another. So we need to go beyond that and look at the question, what is the government doing? But certainly diversity beyond religion, diversity beyond states, and also the issue of competence. The Constitution says, and I'll give you one story, and this story, and I'll leave you on this story. When I was in the central bank, okay, the Human Resources Department came with recommendations for minimum qualifications for being a driver in the central bank. And it said the driver must have have taken O-level exams. Okay. And I said, look, why don't we ask for at least one credit or two? And they said, no, that, once he has sat for O-levels, that is fine. And when I argued deeply, you know what they told me? They said, Governor, this qualification is the qualification you need to be the president of Nigeria in our constitution. If you sit for O-levels, even if you do not have a single credit, once you show that you went through secondary school, you can be the president of Nigeria. I mean, what kind of country is this? What kind of country is this? So long, and if you appoint ministers from 36 states, so long as they have gone through O-levels, you have met the constitutional requirement. We need to ask ourselves, do we have a process that brings out people who are not competent? Can we have a constitution that narrows the path, that makes it impossible for people who do not have skills, who cannot take public responsibility to get to public office? Should any thug with a godfather just find himself as a governor, as a commissioner, as a minister, simply because he comes from a local government or from a state? I mean, these are things that we need to look at. Okay, in Tunisia, they once had a rule that said every party must alternate between a male candidate and a female candidate in every election. Now, it didn't work because what the parties did was they all had men and female, and then they kept winning. But you can have legal conditions that will make it impossible for us to have a Senate that is 90% male. Why can't you say that no more than 60% of the ministers in the cabinet can come from one gender? Then he has to look for 40% who are female. So I think one of the reasons, one of the big issues we have as a country is that we do not understand the virtue and the greatness of diversity. And it is in our own interest, everybody's interest, because you're not going to be there forever, to have diversity, because when the person from your religion or your faith is not there, you know that the system will make it work. This is, I think, where the issue is, and it's about us as a people and the social the social the civil society to hold political society to account on this. Not only shout when Christians shout when you have a Muslim president that they're marginalized, Muslims shout when there's a Christian president that they're marginalized, and we don't talk. I mean, like I said, when Obasanjo was there, I defended him, okay, because I said, look, this is the constitution that we have. And I'm not defending any kind of lopsided appointment. Even if you fill the government with Muslims, I am worried, because if you do that, I know that after 2023, you will have the Muslims complaining that you have Christians. I will continue with this circle, and I really don't care whether you have Muslims or Christians. Please give me competent people who are going to work for the Nigerian people. And nobody has to talk about the of these people.
Yeah, and that is exactly why in my initial question around the involvement of young people, I highlighted the NSAS movement, because you were talking about, civil society that doesn't just shout only when they're Christians or Muslims. I think that was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious movement demanding the kind of change that we're talking about in this conversation. But I do want to pass the question on to your lordship, and then we can take another question before we come to a close. Your response, Bishop KUKAH.
I'm sure Khalifa remembers, I think it was 2018 when he received an honorary doctorate degree in the University of Abuja. I delivered the convocation lecture the day before. And the title of my lecture was Managing Diversity in Nigeria. It's a theme that I discovered I've been obsessed with for a period of time. I'm not happy with where we are now. And I really, if I had my way, it is every time we have to discuss and define ourselves as Christians and Muslims, it just pains me no end. And it's a bit of a tragedy, but it's also the quality of consciousness among us that we seem not to be able to get past these conversations about representation in government. Important as they are mere symbolisms. I mean, when I talk about the composition of government, in terms of the way this government has favored, that's not even the point. One of my best friends perhaps I have more friends in this government, if I may put it that way, than I've ever had. A good number of them are fantastic people I have no problem with. The point that we're always talking about in diversity, managing diversity, is the symbolic feeling that everybody has to get a feeling that they are included in the room. And I think Khalifa has made this point most eloquently. But again, for me, it's how we move away from this whole thing to get to a point in which we can begin to celebrate ourselves as citizens. We haven't said anything yet about the excruciating pain that has been inflicted on this country with the endless hemorrhaging of human lives. I mean, this more than any other thing has pushed us back. It has created more anger, more frustration. This is not who we are. This is absolutely not who we are. And I think that the greatest challenge for me going forward is that somehow I still am convinced that we in northern Nigeria need to start thinking a little bit more differently about the issues. We're talking about the youth. I mean, when NSAS happened, nothing happened in northern Nigeria. At least that's what we thought. But shortly after NSAS, about a month, the following month, I was invited to a conversation on Zoom by young northerners, talking about NSAS, and I was shocked by the kind of things that I saw and the quality of the conversation. I mean, I could not imagine that these young people who were speaking were young people from northern Nigeria. It was just a question of perhaps the lack of outlet, but their anger, their frustration were basically the same. Northern Nigeria is facing an existential threat. That is that you have a young generation of northerners who are looking at a completely different window about what they want for themselves, the kind of life that they want, how they feel about religion. And those of us who are religious leaders must be worried by the fact that people are now making a choice deliberately of not even wanting to be identified as Christians, so I mean as Muslims. The Pew Foundation did a study, I think in 2019 or so, and showed that a staggering almost 40% of Muslims in northern Nigeria didn't want to be identified as either Sunni or Shia or anything. So there is a lot of change, especially for the younger generation. Whether northern Nigeria is prepared, and I tell the young people when I can find them in northern Nigeria, let's come out of the silos that our uncles and our fathers have been locked in. This nonsense about northerners, about being a northerner, or being a Muslim, or being a Christian. Clearly, as the Caliph has said, there is nothing to suggest that by particular people holding particular positions, anybody has benefited anything. So I think even we have a challenge, and civil society must begin to think a bit more clearly about how to take our people away from this obsession with government, because in the final analysis, governance delivers very little in terms of the welfare and the opportunities of many people. You find that if people position themselves, and this is what young people are now realizing, that if you position yourself enough to be able to do business, whoever is in power will really not be the issue. And if we can shift our attention from distributing resources, distributing opportunities, to creating environment, the kind of environment that our young people can thrive in. So I have tremendous hope, in the younger generation. But I think what is very interesting, and I think my Muslim friends, a lot of my Muslim friends are aware and we talk about all this, that there is a new generation of young northerners now who are not concerned about Islam as a religion. A good number, you might say the same about Christianity, say about religion, because young people are becoming totally disillusioned. So the manipulation of religion is coming at a great cost to Christianity. But I would like to end by saying that we, the elite, in the area of education, as I said, I mean, the idea that we have a university or we have universities where one of the most important things in our life, which is freedom of religion, is not being practiced, and nobody can give you an explanation. Now, these are it is these policy defaults that make people generate a certain kind of feeling and consciousness. Because if I'm denied this, or if I don't have this, what is the reason? What the Khalifa said, of course, that is probably why he's no longer Emir of Kano. Okay, because he took positions that maybe you might say the larger society was not ready for. Yeah. But this is the part of martyrdom, if I may put it that way. That in the final analysis, all of us as leaders have obligations. We don't have obligations to make people happy by the things we say. We have an obligation to search for, find the truth, and present it to our people. But I think the future lies in our opening up our society to a younger generation of Nigerians who want something different, who want to be freed from the stranglehold of religion, especially more so in northern Nigeria, where people are behaving as if, you cannot leave the religion, you can't marry whom you want. There is a growing feeling that is drawing inspiration from the kind of things that you were talking about the 15th and 16th century. There are clear Salafist narratives that are so divisive that they are not doing the religion of Islam any good, nor are they doing the larger society any good. This is the implication of where we are today. And we must find enough Muslims to be able to roll back this conversation so that the religion itself can be seen in a much clearer manner. And then religion will have the capacity and ability to do what it was meant to do, namely give people a better life.
Thank you very much, Bishop KUKAH. And with that view and the eyes to the future, I do want to bring in one more question. And it's a question regarding the youth and the new generation. And it's a question from Julia Kego. And it goes like this: how do we invest in a new generation of northern and southern leaders? For example, how can platforms like the School of Policies, Politics and Governance be used to build a new cadre of youth, women leaders, especially in the North? Your Highness, you were talking about gender diversity. So building and raising and investing in a new generation of women leaders for the North. How do we invest in leaders who create a sense of shared values and strong institutions? And do you think it is possible to create a pragmatic, and I'm curious as to how and where, create a pragmatic 10, 20, 30-year plan strategy for these series of talks and an actual implementation? So how do we invest in a new generation of northern and southern leaders? If leadership is the problem, if political leadership is a problem, how should we invest and where?
Okay, so Leena, well, first of all, I think let's start with this audience. Okay, and this is part of the problem when you talk about Nigerian politics. Okay, we need first of all to start having honest conversations and also make use of our education. So I'll give you an example. I've been reading some of the comments here. I talked about gender, and people were saying, this is just running away from the issue of religion. Now, how do you discuss, for example, how do you challenge patriarchal interpretations of Islam or Christianity, okay, by men, if you do not push the issue of gender equality and gender education? I mean, they're all linked. The reason we have excluded women is because in our culture and in our tradition of our religion, we have marginalized them. And, as a country, these are issues that need to be brought to the table. And I'll give you one example. When I was governor of Central Bank, I tried to reduce a 5,000 naira note. I don't know if you've looked at Nigerian currency. If you looked at all the notes in Nigeria, from 1 naira all the way to 1,000 naira, do you know that there's only one woman? Ladi Kwadi. Her name was not even mentioned. They took her picture. She was a potter. Okay. They took her picture, put it on the margins. Her name is not even mentioned. That is how marginal the woman is. This is our national currency. I tried to introduce the 5,000 naira note. On that note, there were going to be 3 women. Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, Gambo Sawaba, and Margaret Echo. We wanted to show that, first of all, Nigeria was not just won by founding fathers. There were founding mothers. Okay? I wanted to show that women were part of the independence struggle. I wanted to show that women, okay, were in early days of independence, talking about girl-child education, women's participation in politics, women's rights. I wanted to bring the question of the woman to the center of political discourse. And I had these women from the North and the South, West, East, and North on the notes to make that point. Okay, Nigerians fought against 5,000. I mean, just 5,000, they had no economic arguments. Nobody even saw the benefit of bringing this neglected part of discourse to the table. Now, these things boil down to leadership. At the end of the day, all the countries that have made progress, all the countries that have broken away the glass ceiling and the barrier, all of them had that with leadership. When I was in Central Bank, I got the bankers together in 2011, and we declared 2012 the year of the woman in banking. all the bankers signed to an agreement that 50% of all recruitments will be female. They would aim to get to 40% top management as women. They would aim to have 30% of the board as female. Today, you have 8 female CEOs in Nigerian banking industry as a result of that. When I promoted female directors in Central Bank was set up in 1959. I became governor in 2009. 50 years of central bank history, only 4 women had made director and not at the same time. Only 4 in 50 years. As governor, I promoted 8 women to directors. This is not about, it's at the end of the day, it's about the values of fairness. And because in my understanding of religion, men and women are different, but they are equal. Difference is one thing, inequality is another. And I don't have to raise a flag of being a Muslim, but I know that my religion basically treats men and women as equal. Gender equality is consistent with my own understanding of my faith and my own understanding of religion. I have daughters there. I make sure they're all educated, and I make sure that education is more important than anything else to them. And I think we need to work, as leaders. So the problem is not about, I keep saying, Muslim, Christian. Look, Obasanjo was a Christian, but look at his government. I mean, whatever you say about Obasanjo, nobody can accuse him of being an ethnic bigot. You may not disagree, you may not agree with him. You looked at his kitchen cabinet. You had Northerners, Southerners, Muslims, Christians, and nobody. I know. Yes, I mean, you'd always have people on the margins making the noise, but people were not. You've got to be fair. And I think what we need to do is make sure that these are the values that we need to have. And what are these common values that we have as Nigerians, and how do we find them? And how do we push for them? So the idea that because we're discussing gender or we're discussing the economy, we're taking religion off the table is not true, because at the end of the day, these things that we see are consequences of the way we have interpreted religion and we've taken religion. So they're all tied up, and they're already. So even from this audience, you can see that there are people who take a position that, this is a defense of the North, or this is a defense of Islam, or this. That is not the case. The point is, you've got to look at merit at the end of the day. In my religion, the prophet says, there's a hadith of the prophet, he says, anyone who appoints any person to a responsibility for the people, and he appoints someone who is less qualified and overlooks that, or the one who is better qualified because of some personal interest, has betrayed the trust of God and the prophet and the believers. That is merit. How does a Muslim appoint somebody because he's his in-law or because he's his friend to a ministerial position or to a serial position simply by virtue of that? Is nepotism. Nepotism is un-Islamic. Now you can go to mosque 5 times a day. You can pray. You can pray all night. You can read the Quran all the day. So long as you practice nepotism in government, you are running against the teaching of the Prophet. That's why I say, when we say religion, what is religion? What is your view on women? What is your view on work? What is your view on appointments? What is your view on fairness?
And we can have these conversations concurrently. I'm sorry for kind of intervening there. I've been looking at the comment box. We have a very active and very energetic and lively conversation going on there, but I've been prompted by the team to pass on the baton or the virtual mic to the VP Aminu Mukhtar. So I don't know if you are there, Aminu Mukhtar. We of course cannot take any more questions or any more of the comments. I hope that just all the content of the chat box is being preserved. There's been a lot of discussion there, a lot of questions answered there already, so that we contain and preserve the contents of the chat post. But thank you so much for your engagement, panel. Thank you so much for your clarity of thought and the energy of your conversation. It is possible, as we have shown today, to have these conversations concurrently about religion, gender, about political leadership, and still, have a sense of ourselves and a sense of respect and regard for each other's thoughts and contributions. So, Dr. Aminu Mukhtar, I pass on the virtual mic to you. Thank you very much.
Well, should I just a moment? Okay, Mr. Vice President. Thank Thank you so much, Leena. Thank you so much, Your Highness. Thank you so much, Your Lordship. Just before my colleague, Dr. Aminu Mukhtar, before he offers the closing remarks, I just thought to say just a very quick thank you and to say that it's been an excellent conversation. The chat box, the question box, it's just been fantastic with the kinds of insights that you provided. And I think we've had an excellent conversation. And I think as an alumni association, we have achieved or are achieving our strategic objectives. And so the follow through to this is that a position paper will be issued with your kind permission. Some of the very salient points you've made would be made into small clips and shared widely. There's a YouTube channel, the link will be provided so that individuals who could not join us will be able to join us. But one thing is very clear, it's not about religion, it's about leadership. Not just about leadership, it's about incompetent or competent leadership, as the case may be. It's about vision, it's about exposure, it's about compassion, it's about a sense of service, what it really means to serve. It's about respect for your population, be they male or female, boy or girl, north or south. That's what it is about. And what I hear, the consensus I hear, I've heard in the course of the conversation, is that it is wrong to attribute the policy decisions or strategic vision of any particular individual who is head of a government to an entire region. It is retrogressive in the words of His Highness, and it's really, really unfair. And I think that His Lordship, Bishop KUKAH, also shares very similar perspectives. And that, well, without prejudice to the very important points made by His Highness, he still believes that there are real issues around one's religious bias in the country today. What part of country an individual may come from in the country today, even as we see that, yes, it's probably based on the policy thrust of a particular district. So again, clearly, Nigeria cannot develop by accident. No nation has developed by accident. And some of the nations that we choose to be like did not develop by accident. They were not developed by ethnic or religious irredentists. They were developed by visionaries, people who cared for their people who were disciplined. This is what has emerged from this conversation. So thank you so much. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Aminu Mukhtar, the Vice President of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of Nigeria, to just offer the closing remarks, and then we're good to go. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I have less than a minute to make my remarks, but I will start by thanking our father, His Highness, the Khalifa, Khalifa, and His Grace, His Lordship, Father Bishop HASSAN Matthew KUKAH, for spending quality time in this a debate. Well, I wouldn't want to call it a debate, but it turned out to be more or less like a debate. But thankfully, a lot of issues have been put forward, and we thank you for your diligence on this, and we appreciate you taking out your time out of your precious time to address us in this occasion. Yeah, so our moderator, Dr. Leena Hoffmann, we thank you for a wonderful moderation of this event. And special thanks to our participants who have logged in to watch this very eventful program. And we appreciate if you kindly follow us on our social media platforms for further programs that will come soon, inshallah. And thank you, the organizers of this platform, of this webinar. And we look forward to having a very interesting moment soon, inshallah. Wish everybody a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you so much again, Your Highness. Thank you, Your Lordship. Thank you, Leena. Thank you to our very gracious audience who have stayed with us all through patiently. We thank you so much for the immense contributions you've made. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody. Bishop, you're in Lagos. You didn't come to see me.
But I didn't know you're in Lagos now. I thought you're in Kaduna.
Which Kaduna? I only visit Kaduna from. I'm going there tomorrow for the colloquium. I only visit Kaduna. I'm a Lagos person now.
I didn't know that.
You people have sent me. You have sent me out of the north. So, I'm back to base.
No, you are now at large.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Okay, I'm off to Kaduna tomorrow, but let's